Welcome everybody to this episode of Ensigns to the Nations, where we get to walk around the Saratoga Springs Temple and talk about the Come Follow Me lesson.
Yep, this week we're going to be talking about the book of Judges, and there's a lot of interesting stories in this book. Things that I never really learned in primary, so we've got some fun things to talk about today.
Right.
But we'll still be covering the three things that we talk about in every episode, which are see, study, and shine.
Yep.
We look at these lessons in a new way. We see something new that you never knew before. We study, we learn some new doctrine, and then we shine. We figure out how to apply them in our lives. And so for our C portion, I just want to, did I ever tell you guys that my dad was a beekeeper? Did you know that?
Yes.
Maya, did you know that? Did I tell you that?
Yeah.
We had beehives, and so we had our own honey that we made. I would actually give our teachers honey for Christmas.
Oh,
That's
really?
what our family gave for our gifts when we were in elementary school. But so at the time, I wasn't super excited about that because bees stung you, and so I didn't love them.
That's why Maya hates bees.
Maya is not a fan of bees. But come to find out, let me tell you a little bit of something about bees. They are actually foundational to global ecosystems and human survival. That's how important they are. They are the primary pollinators of the food we eat. They're responsible for pollinating over 75% of the flowers and 35% of our crops, which in turn, it grows all of the fruits and vegetables, which feeds not only people, but all of the animals.
Right.
And so down the chain of the food chain. So that's why they are foundational and important for us. And so this week we're going to actually talk about one of the judges whose name means honeybee, because she was actually foundational for the Israelites and their success.
I was going to say, all the judges were foundational for the Israelites. This is happening after the death of Joshua, and it covers about 350 years, and there's 12 to 14, depending upon what you consider to be a judge, 12 to 14 people that are these judges, and they were specifically called out in the scriptures to say that they are there to help get Israel out of the wars that they're in.
Well, they're not actually judges like we think of
Right.
them. When we think of a judge, we think of a courtroom and a guy and a girl, whoever, in a big black robe with a gavel. That's not who these people were.
Not
The
necessarily.
actual type of leader they were was more like a deliverer.
Yeah.
That's the word. This could be called the book of deliverers, really, and it probably would have been a little bit more accurate. In fact, in one of the verses in Judges 3:9, it uses that word. It says, "And when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer."
There you go.
And you see that pattern over and over with the
Definitely.
Israelites, how there's a cycle, right?
Yes, there's definitely a cycle. There's the cycle with the Israelites stop believing in God, stop following Him, and then they sin, and then they get conquered by another nation, and then they cry to the Lord for help.
And then the Lord gives them a judge or a deliverer.
Yes.
And so then they become righteous again.
And it happens over and over again.
And so all of these judges or deliverers that we see in this book came at a time in that cycle as it goes round and round.
In fact, it says in chapter 2, verse 10, it said, "These were the people," so this is the Israelites at the time, at many different times, "which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which He had done for Israel." So that's the state that they were in.
The four things that you can even think of are sin, servitude, supplication, and salvation.
Oh, nice.
So they sinned, and then they grew into servitude, where the Lord kind of removed His protection and allowed the neighboring nations to conquer them.
Right.
And then there was supplication, meaning that Israel's cried out to God for deliverance, and then there was salvation. So those S words.
So like I said, there's about 12 to 14 judges. The first couple, Othniel and Ehud, were somewhat successful, but I'd like to concentrate on three of them, the first one being Deborah.
Wasn't there a judge that stabbed a fat king?
Oh yes, let's talk about the judge that stabbed the fat king first.
So Ehud was this judge who who was supposed to help Israel, and this king, and he was very, very fat. He stabbed him with a knife. He was a left-handed judge, right?
Yes, he was a southpaw judge,
Yes.
like Rocky Balboa.
Right, because and that's the way he hid his knife when he approached the king. Stabbed him so hard it went right in and disappeared. But again, he was successful in overthrowing that corrupt nation and government. So it worked. So with Deborah, Judges chapter 4 tells us that Israel once again were doing evil stuff. The Lord wanted to the Lord had sent Canaanites to take over them. The king was Jabin, and this commander named Sisera, he was terrifying because he had 900 iron chariots.
Yeah, not just chariots,
Yes,
but iron 900.
chariots. So that'd be like tanks today, and people were terrified of them. And they had overthrown the Israelites for 20 years. So imagine how hopeless that was to so many people. Then, of course, he raised up Deborah as a judge or a deliverer. And Deborah, again, is even more interesting because they also call her a prophetess.
She's the only one that has that label out of
Yes,
all of
she's
the
the only
judges.
one.
And so she would prophesy.
Yes.
She had her own office, so to speak.
Yes, it was under the palm of Deborah.
Yes. Literally she sat under a palm tree, and that's where people would come to her to seek the wisdom of God.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So they're all scared because they can't take this Deborah or take this Sisera over. But Deborah received revelation saying that the Lord would deliver Sisera into their hands. So she calls this military leader named Barak, and she tells him that the Lord told her to gather 10,000 men, go to Mount Tabor, and the Lord will deliver Sisera into your hand.
I thought there was a prophecy about a woman who kills the Canaanite general.
Oh, so this Canaanite general, yes, you're right. There was, and so what Barak said is, he said, well, I'll go, but only if you go with me, Deborah. So he hesitated. He was a little scared, as was everybody there, except for Deborah. She had confidence. She had faith. She knew that the Lord was going to help. So she says, yeah, okay, I'll go. But I want to tell you another prophecy, and that is Sisera will be killed by a woman. It wasn't Deborah, though, so we'll get to that part. So the battle happened like this. They went up to this Mount Tabor. Sisera and his 900 chariots come up to this river, Kishon, I think it's called. And then the rains came, according to chapter 5 in Judges, which is called the Song of Victory for Deborah. They talk about rain and mud, and the iron chariots get stuck in the mud, and so the thing that made him so awesome was then just kind of taken out, and he couldn't do anything. And they ran and they took off. And then he runs and takes off, and he goes to this lady's house named Jael, and she says, okay, come on in. Here's something to drink, some milk. Here, rest your head here. He goes to sleep, and she kills him in the head, stabs him in the head with a tent peg. So that was the prophecy, Maya, that there would be somebody, and it really meant the end of the Israelites' problems with the Canaanites. So that was awesome. So not long after that, the Israelites went through the cycle again, and sin and fear, and the Midianites this time they would come and conquer the Israelites every time they had food, and they'd steal their food and they'd steal their animals, and so they lived in fear for quite some time. We first hear about Gideon hiding. He's hiding in a winepress. He was getting the wheat ready to thresh, and he was hiding in there, and he was, because the Midianites, he didn't want the Midianites to see him because they'd take the food. So here's this great judge, this great leader that's supposed to deliver the Israelites, and he's hiding doesn't seem like that kind of guy. But that's what we learned from Gideon, is that he is somebody who you wouldn't think would be this great leader who's going to deliver the Israelites from the Midianites. Which of course, some we also just learned from Deborah. She was not a typical leader. This is a male-dominated society. So what do we learn from these two judges that we're talking about, at least? The Lord calls people who he knows can be great for him, and not necessarily in outwardly worldly strength. Well, this angel comes and visits Gideon, and he says to him, "The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor." He didn't seem like a man of valor at the time. In fact, he asked questions like, "Hey, why do we not do? What's going on with all the miracles and stuff? Where have you been, God? Why do you think I can do this?" He even says, "My family is poor, and I am the least of my father's house." So he did not think that he was going to be a good leader. But again, God calls people weak and think they're inadequate, because his answer to Gideon was this: "Surely I will be with thee." And that was enough for Gideon. Well, sort of. One of the first things that he asked Gideon to do is to tear down this idol, the statue of Baal that was in his village. In fact, his family had made it. He was a little scared to do that because he knew that they'd get in trouble. So he actually did it in the middle of the night. And there, hey, in the middle of the night, and there he tore down this statue of Baal. Now, he was afraid to do it. That's why he did it in the middle of the night, so he wouldn't get in trouble. But he did it anyway. And that's something that we can learn from Gideon, is even though we're afraid, just push through it and do it anyway. And this tearing down of idols is important. This is the first thing that he wanted him to do. He wasn't working on his enemies, he was working on Gideon and the Israelites.
Yeah, like, are we gonna have statues that we worship? What idols do we have now?
Well, yeah, you're right. We don't have idols that we're going to tear down. We don't worship those kind of things. But what things do we worship now? Do we worship TVs? Do we worship money? Do we worship pride? I know, phones and social media and YouTube channels.
It could be anything. Anything that takes our focus away from what's really important.
Right. And that's really the thing to think about, is ask yourself, what takes me away from God? That's a form of worship. So he goes on. He says, "Okay, I'm going to do this. And he gets 32,000 men in his army. And this is up against the Midianites, which was 135,000. And the Lord comes to him and says, "You know what? You've got too many." What?
It's already only like a fourth.
Yeah, I'm already feeling nervous about this. He said, "No, you got too many. I don't want you to think, or anybody to think, that it's because of you guys that you won this battle. I want them to know it's because God's helping you." So he goes out and he says, "Okay, everybody who's scared can go home." And that got rid of 22,000 of them, so they've got 10,000. God still says, "Nope, too much." So then he does a little trick, and he says, "Everybody go down and get some water out of the river." And everybody who just went down into the water and slurped it up, they went home, and the ones who used their hand to slurp it up, they stayed, and that was only 300. So now it's 300 to 135,000. Now, there's no way they could think that it was man's abilities to win this war. So they all go in the middle of the night. They have They don't have swords. What do they have? They have
trumpet.
Yes.
They have three things.
Yes.
They ask each person to have a trumpet.
Yeah.
A pitcher.
Yes.
And a candle, right?
Yep. A candle or a torch.
Yeah.
And they took these torches and they hid it inside the pitcher.
And can you imagine, like, if I was going into battle and someone told me this is what you should bring with you?
Yeah.
I don't think I would have enough faith for that.
We're going against all these
I don't
people.
really know about this trumpet idea.
So at the right time, Gideon yells at them, and they all break their pitchers, which shows their lights, and they blow their trumpet, and they yell, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon." And that made everybody confused. They didn't know what was going on. They fought each other, and that's how 300 took the 135,000.
And so the Lord proved it was his power,
Yes.
his deliverers that
Yes.
did it. It was not, their sword.
One thing that I like in here is the fact that we're saying that don't pay attention to so much to man's power, pay attention to God's power. He's the one who's going to do this.
Yeah, and we've only really covered 2 of
Yes.
the judges or
Right.
deliverers. We talked a lot about Deborah.
Right.
We talked a lot about Gideon, which were 2 of the best, I would say.
They
but
really
there
are.
are some really cool stories like Samson and
Yes.
lots more. We
Right.
talked a little bit about the
Ehud. Yeah.
too, but these stories go into so much interesting detail and there's so much to learn, but the essence of them all is the Spirit of the Lord came upon them.
Yeah.
You see that
Yes.
phrase over and over
That's right.
for these deliverers, and that's how they were successful, really. The Spirit of the Lord came upon
Yeah,
them.
and that's how they were successful. It wasn't because they were so awesome, because all of them even said, "Hey, this is hard for me." Samson was one who had a lot of faults. He did a lot of stupid things, but at the end
But he had his long hair.
well, yeah. That long hair was his covenant, to God, that he was a Nazirite. But at the very end, when he finally killed the most people, it was because he devoted his life to God. It was at the end where he said, "I'm sorry, I wish I had the power back. I wish you were with me again," which was very interesting.
So we talked a lot about seeing these things in the way that they are like honeybees. They are the foundation of how the Israelites were successful.
Right.
And then we studied a lot about the doctrines and about the things that can happen when you have the Spirit of the Lord with you. And that takes us right to shine.
Yeah.
How do we have the Spirit of the Lord with us? And how do we conquer our difficult moments?
Yeah.
It is only through that.
How should we shine this week?
I think that we can shine by doing things that don't seem like they work, but the Lord tells us to, like tithing.
Oh, that's true. That's like one of the things. Like
Yep.
when God told Gideon, "Hey, take all this weird stuff to this battle," that's like sometimes saying, "Hey, you need to pay 10% of your tithing, of your money, to God, and it's going to work out." They didn't know it was going to work out, but it did. So that's right. That's a great way to shine. Well, all right.
All right, and back here we have a temple wedding. We have some people coming out. You may have heard the cheering.
Hoots and hollers.
Yep.
They love it. That's their way to shine today.
All right. Well, good week. We love this stuff to learn about in Judges.
Yeah,
So
it's
this has
awesome.
been a great week. Yeah, lots more that we could talk about, but
But this is more for you to study this week then. So we'll see you next time on
Ensigns to the Nations.
Nations.